All right. I did. I rang it one time. There we go. Quiet, please. All right. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I know that we're broadcasting live, and we've got a few people watching and one or two that are having technical difficulties, and they'll get there in a second. But this is the first meeting of its kind since I've been here, and I'm very glad to be here and to have Chris lined up to make a presentation for us tonight. Thank you to Chris for putting this plan together for us to look at and begin to consider. We're going to offer a prayer here in a moment that the prayer book provides us for meetings and conventions that has a lot to do with making sure that the Lord goes before us into any decision or project that we make. In fact, you'll be happy to hear as the prayer goes that it gives us a tremendous direction for all kinds of decisions in the church, and we really pray that if this is the will of God for us in this place to expand these facilities, to take on a project of this magnitude or the amount of focus and attention this will take over the next few years, we are thankful that He will be the one who will go before us. But at this time, we need to be listening to Him, and we need to be watching for how He's leading us. I'm reminded of Psalm 127 that begins, it sounds like a negative statement, but if you listen to it carefully, it's actually pretty positive. Except the Lord build the house, their labor is but lost that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is but lost labor that ye haste to rise up early, and so late take rest and eat the bread of carefulness, for so He giveth His beloved sleep. Now, we're not looking to do this in order to sleep, but we do need to rest in Him. He needs to go before us, so that rather than saying that except the Lord build a house, their labor is but lost that build it, we may put that positively and say, if the Lord goes before us, none of our labor is in vain, and what He wills to come to pass, we will see come to pass. We're very glad to be having this discussion tonight, and you'll see that the plan for the plan, as what we're really doing tonight, is very carefully thought out, and I think you'll like what you hear. Before we begin, we shall pray. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, who by Thy Holy Spirit didst preside in the council of the blessed apostles, and has promised, through Thy Son Jesus Christ, to be with Thy church to the end of the world, we beseech Thee to be with the council of Thy church here assembled in Thy name and presence. Save us from all error, ignorance, pride, and prejudice, and of Thy great mercy vouchsafe, we beseech Thee so to direct, sanctify, and govern us in our work by the mighty power of the Holy Ghost, that the comfortable gospel of Christ may be truly preached, truly received, truly followed in all places, to the breaking down of the kingdom of sin, Satan, and death, till at length the whole of Thy dispersed sheep, being gathered into one fold, shall become partakers of everlasting life, through the merits and death of Jesus Christ our Savior. Amen. All right. Please.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm glad to be finally starting this project that we've been talking about for a little while yet. On the finance committee, through talking with Bobier and the work of the other vestry. It's neat to be here and to be now thinking about how are we going to solve the challenges that are ahead of us. Now, I call this a strategic planning discussion for a reason. Because it is that, it's a discussion. What I'm looking for is for your questions, for your feedback, for your thoughts, as we go through this whole project from now until when we decide that we're finished, whether that's with a new building or that's with another solution to the challenges that we face. So, so I'm really excited to get started. And it's good to see a full room. I think when you get a lot of folks to turn out for an event like this, it means one of two things maybe. Either there's great enthusiasm for what we're going to be talking about, or great animosity towards it, or maybe just curiosity. I think I'll settle for that. So, as Father Paul sort of alluded to, we're not going to talk about the plan tonight. That's what we're not going to do. What we're going to talk about tonight is a framework for how we'll collaboratively create the plan. So as we go through this, just be thinking about, okay, so this is sort of a first draft of how we'll work together to create the plan, and it is written in electrons rather than chiseled in stone for a reason, because I think the minute we leave here, it's going to start changing, and that's fine. It should, because we're going to start putting more brain power into it, more information into it, and it'll get better and better as we go. Okay, so here's the agenda, and rather than sort of a bullet list of topics I'm going to cover, I've framed it in questions. What are we doing? Is the first one. Why are we doing it, and why are we doing it now? How will we proceed? How long will it take, and who will be involved? And if I do this right, by the end of this presentation, you'll have all those questions answered. And I put a picture up there. I found it as I was stumbling around on the internet looking for ideas, and I ran across this one, and I decided I just had to show it to you because it warms my heart to see this one. I think Bob will pick up on why right away, but that is Old St. Paul's Church in Wellington, New Zealand. And those of you who know your World War II history will know that Wellington was the headquarters of the 2nd Marine Division during the Second World War. So I can't attest to how many Marines were actually in the pews, but they did honor the Corps by hanging our colors there. Okay, so a little background. 2022, the vestry decided to promote growth in the parish. And we took a number of actions, and you saw them, but maybe you didn't know why. Number one, we upgraded and updated the website. And this is all designed to sort of increase visibility of the church. So first thing was to update and upgrade the website. We renewed the sign. We got a new sign out there and freshened that up. We removed the fence so that people could see the sign coming from the south, and so they could see the front of the church a little bit better. And we removed that big tree that was in the corner. It was obstructing the church. It was not only doing that, but it was also potentially damaging the roof. So that we killed two birds with one stone on that one. But the idea was to make the church more visible in the community and to those who might be looking for us on the internet. And those actions contributed to a net increase of 10 members from 22 to 23. Now, since 2014, we've had an average rate of growth of 6%, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And given our morning and midday Mass ratio, it's roughly 1/3 to 2/3, we can safely, or we have sort of an upper limit of 150 to 125 members. When you look at just a couple of weeks ago on the 10th, the count was 88 for Mass, and if anybody was there at the 11 o'clock, you know how crowded that was. And then, that sort of carries out into the parking lot as well. And that's visible, and people will see that it's crowded, which is good, but I've got no place to park if I want to try there, which is not good. Something we'll have to address. Next slide. So let's take a look at the membership from 2012, and these numbers are the snapshot that are given at the annual parish meeting. So it's November time frame of every year. And we start the first two, 2012 and 2013, those are sort of outliers because you've got a 30% increase and a 9% decrease. But looking at the rest of the slope, when that 6% average annual growth, I've just kind of factored out the two outliers, and you'll see that in the next couple of slides as well. And I think, Rob, there you are. 2020, you said? We had a big bump in membership in 2020. The Holiday Clan came aboard. So here's some projections. Just on a straight line projection will put us in 2030 at between 175 and 191. If we apply the 6% growth, then we get to a much bigger number in 2030 of 212. Here we are. The black line is 12 days from now. And our red zone, if you'll buy that 150 to 175 is about as big as we can get in this facility, then the red zone starts in 2025 in either of the projections. Either the straight line projection will be there or using the annual percentage growth. So at that point, we're sort of butting up against the edges of our facility and our capacity. So what do we do? So we think about addressing the space with two plans run roughly concurrently that we'll call our strategic plan. The master plan applies to the buildings and grounds, the facilities, the parking, and how we solve the physical space. The capital campaign is raising the funds to accomplish whatever it is we set out to do. Okay? I'm not going to read the detail. You've got copies in front of you. We're going to hang this on the website, but I'll walk through some of sort of the highlights. So phase one is assessment and visioning, where we figure out, we take a good solid look at what we have currently, and we decide collaboratively what we want. Okay, how are we going to satisfy the needs of all the different ministries? How much space do we want to set aside for classrooms? How big do we think the church ought to be? Should it be for to be able to seat 150, 200, 250? What, sort of what scale do we want it to be? And we do two parallel feasibility studies. One of them looking at the grounds. What can we accomplish? What can we do in the current construction environment on this piece of property with all the county regulations and zoning regulations? What can we do here? And will that satisfy what we decide are our requirements? And then on the capital campaign side, we'll take a look at how much money can we feasibly expect to be able to raise over the time period. Okay? Phase two, we get an initial sort of conceptual design, and we try to sort of nudge together the number we think we can raise, the construction that we think we can accomplish, and begin to nudge them together in this phase. We engage the community, the local community, our neighbors. We probably ought to talk to, because if we do decide to build something, there'll be a point where we will be expected to hang a red sign on the property saying there's going to be hearings down at the county office, and everybody can come and say something. And we ought to have made friends with everybody who's around us, or at least know what their objections are going to be, right? So addressing the community, engaging the local community will be one of the first things, but also engaging the broader to the APA community, because there are other churches that have learned a lot. They've built, they're ahead of us, by a decade or two, or even just a few years. There are a number of projects that are going on across the diocese, and we should engage them and learn from what they've done. And then on the capital campaign, we'll organize a team. We'll set the goals based on what we decided we want to be able to build. And then we set a detailed design. And at that point, we think about spending some money with an architect to either create a model or a very high quality rendering that we can put in the narthex so people can see what it is we're trying to do. We can hang it on our website so anybody who comes to the website can see what it is we're trying to do and see our timeline, and then begin to generate a little enthusiasm both here and in the broader community that's looking at our website. So phase 3, this is the only one that's sort of TBD in terms of timing. And I should go back. The timing on these are pretty generous, I think. I just kind of took a wild guess at roughly what it would take to do the feasibility assessments, to do the initial design to a detailed design. When we get into details, we'll probably refine that, and I think it'll come out a little bit shorter. But what you're looking at is 27 to 42 months, 2 to 4 years, not counting the amount of time to raise the funds that we're going to need. Okay, so that one is TBD, and what that gives us sort of acts as a buffer. We do not have to rush and lock ourselves into a large number, if we're not ready. 1-2 years into the capital campaign, if it looks like we need to give ourselves more time, we can do that. We can use that to sort of act as a buffer between having the design and being ready to put shovels in the ground. So in phase 3, we develop our case statement. Why should people want to support us? We write that down because that keeps us all sort of focused on where we're going, and it lets the broader community, again, know why they should support us. Yes?
Just a quick question on the timeline. Is there sequential, like they would add months?
Yes, each one of this on the timeline. But we're running these two concurrently, so they're not stretched out. Okay, so the case statement lets people know what we're doing and why they ought to support us. Then we launch. We make a decision collaboratively. When do we launch? How do we promote it? We talk about what sort of events and how do we engage that we want to do it. We're going to do it all in-house, or are we going to engage others who might want to participate? Are we going to reach out to the broader community? Are we going to reach out to the broader, the diocese? All of those things will be part of this fundraising part. And then at the end, we end up with transition to implementation, and that's when we're ready to put shovels in the ground. And that phase is, a lot of detail work: permitting, approval, construction, QA, completion and occupancy, and that's a process that can take months. And then post-campaign evaluation of what our continuing needs are going to be. As we get into construction, we're going to find that, okay, we've got the building, but we've also got to raise money for additional operations. We've got to raise money for all the things that will be inside the building, and we'll look at, do we continue the capital campaign? Do we take a break from it and pick it up in a year or two? How do we do all these other things or how do we fund all the pieces of the master plan? Because you remember, there's not just the building, there's parking, there's moving other things around on the property as we have right now. So for example, depending on where we decide to build, we may need to move the playground. We'll want to do something with this building that will add to the capacity. So it's potentially a big project that we will phase out in time, both the construction pieces of it and the fundraising pieces. Okay, so I'm throwing this up just for context and perspective. This is St. Mark's, Vero Beach. I talked to Father Mike Monday and asked him what his capacity is. He said 185 comfortably, which I think probably puts you at 215 to 225 on a Christmas Mass or something like that.
They may not know that St. Mark's is an APA.
Sorry. Yes, St. Mark's is in our diocese, and I talked to the rector on Monday to get these details. And the reason I chose St. Mark's is not just because it's a pretty English church, although, but they had to solve a problem similar to ours, and I thought it was kind of neat the way they did. And if you look, that's their drive, that's their back fence, or it's in there somewhere. So they had to squeeze their church. Here's an aerial view of St. Mark's and St. George's. They had to squeeze their church into a space that looks pretty much like ours. Theirs is 300 by 700. Ours is 301 across the line between this piece and the other piece that abuts the fire station. And ours is 577 feet on Batesville Road. So we're looking at the same problem. Can we fit what we want in our narrow space? And the answer is, I think we can. Their church is 130 feet end to end, and they have 184 feet from the walk or from the drive to the back fence to work with. We have 301. We're fine. We can do whatever we want. St. Mary's downtown is 154 feet end to end, and their max cap is 475. And so we can fit what we need here. So it's not a question of do we have the space. The question is, can we do, in the construction environment with the zoning and other county regulations, can we do what we need here? And that'll be part of what the working groups do. And so that is it for my formal portion. Well, one thing I mentioned working groups. If you have the printout, the document there, you'll see down at the bottom the next steps. Our next steps are to establish our planning team, our initial planning team. Yes?
Have you made any preparation or thought about what it would take at a school for that plan?
No. Why? That's for the planning teams to do. But yes, it'll be on the list as I expect it to be on the list of what we want back here.
We have physical problems. We're limited by
Back here.
outside, and we're going to have enough room to have a school.
So that goes in here in the feasibility studies, the assessment and visioning. What do we want? And whether there's a school, how big that school will be, whether you would look further ahead, 10, 12 years after completion of the school, if it's, if we've scaled it properly, or now we're kind of stuck there with, with a smaller facility than we might have wanted, going into the out years. That's one of the types of issues that the working groups will have to wrestle with. And then, that's right. And then that kind of goes into the detailed design and the professional renderings, and perhaps depending on how and I don't want to put any English on the ball here at this point, but depending on how we solve or we resolve the visioning piece, there's potentially a phasing of the construction as well, right? So we church first, reconfigure this building second, additional facilities, a school third, with separate campaigns for each one of those, right? But again, I don't, at this point, we have a blank canvas, and I don't want to put any, sort of English on what we might end up trying to do. So, establish a planning team, create a planning schedule, right? And that's where we'll end up refining these timelines, right? And we'll hold folks to the planning schedule. We'll finalize the lines of effort, the master plan and capital campaign lines of effort. You've got the details in the handout of what the little piece parts of each of those is, but that's sort of Chris Bourne taking a look and marking things down. I'm sure I missed something. So we'll tighten that up collaboratively as well. And then we'll establish working groups. And I'm using that term, working groups, for a reason, right? I'm sort of allergic to committees, because what do people do on committees? They sit back and they talk. And what needs to happen if we're going to do this in a reasonable amount of time is action, decisions, and follow-on actions. And so we will have working groups that will bring this thing to fruition. And I think that's it. So
What's the name of the two churches you referenced? One you just went by.
that is St. Mark's in Vero Beach. That's an APA church. And the first one, which, I've got more pictures. I mean, no, that is Old St. Paul's in Wellington, New Zealand. It was the cathedral. It's old. The new cathedral is a new cathedral, less warm. Sir.
Chris, you're looking at St. Mark's Church in Vero Beach. Did you find other similarities between St. George's and St. Mark's in terms of demographics and things like that? I mean, you're looking at their physical plan, but do we have some similarities being in Simpsonville versus Vero Beach? I would assume Vero Beach probably has an older demographic in their membership. Maybe their income levels may be a little bit higher, but are there some other similarities you discovered?
You hit the two of the three, I think, and actually Father Paul kind of filled me in on the third one. So yes, it is. There are more retired in the parish, and it's also they've got the snowbirds that go back and forth. So their membership or their participants, mass goers, goes up and down seasonally. So that's different than here. And you're right. They're bona fide retirees, and so there's a little more money there.
So I presume that they went through this recently or semi-recently?
I think they're 10 years?
Sandy has an experience with this parish. It was about 10 or 15 years ago.
John's Island,
Yeah.
it's a very affluent community. And that I lived in Vero Beach from 1985, well, lived there a long time. And going to the Episcopal Church at the time, and St. Mark's with the member. Just visited it, as a matter of fact, 3 years ago. It's lovely, but it's it's nice. I like it here better. And maybe that's just because I was visiting.
How did they fund their church and how, and did he, I know some thought, did he have any input in the endowment fund he's been looking into setting up? Because you cannot finance the church without an endowment fund.
Yeah. I don't have those details on how they did it, but you're right, and that goes back to feasibility study on the capital campaign, and the bottom line of effort there, feasibility study. How are we going to do this, sir?
All this aside, I don't know what everybody's talking about. But when does month one start?
Next month.
Okay, so we're going to go from January 1 to December 31st on phase 1.
6 to 12 months. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, when we figure out how much. And when I say next month, so next month, and I'll pass out. I've got some sign-up sheets. Next month we'll get started. Yes. Next month we will start establishing the working groups, and refine the plan. And so at some point after we get that done, it'll take a couple of weeks, I think. Then we'll start this clock.
Because we can't talk about any church anywhere else,
Yeah.
we need to start to find out, and this is just my opinion here, we need to start to think and ask for God's guidance on what we need to do here in Simpsonville. Great what they do in Vero Beach and all that's wonderful, but we're here, and we need to
That's right.
focus on that.
That's right. So the only purpose of the Vero Beach example was just to give a sense of scale. Because I know I drive into the parking lot and I don't think 301 feet is, and I wasn't doing the math on what that means in terms of how many people could we seat in a building that would fit there. And so I said, well, let's see how that works. And, that's favorable. Now, maybe only one favorable aspect of the piece of property. That's something we'll figure out as we go. Hand over here.
So what does the planning team and the working group look like? Do you have
No.
who's coming up with?
So the first thing we'll do, and the first set of volunteers I'm looking for, is the initial planning team that will make those decisions. I mean, I could make those decisions. I don't want to. I don't want to because I want everything that we do here to be fully collaborative. Everybody weighs in. There are no bad ideas. There might be ideas that don't get into the mix, all right? But there are good ideas that we just didn't put them in. All the ideas will get up on the board, right? And then we'll together sort out which are in and which will be considered later. Yes. Oh, I'll come back to you.
Does that picture on the right show full expansion of the property that we bought, a couple years ago from the fire department?
No, this probably shows, let me think. Let me see here. Yeah, it's about right. So if you look at these trees,
Our property line is just beyond.
that's right there.
Just beyond the trees?
But it doesn't have, this one doesn't have the lower part because I zoomed in. So you can see the roof a little better. But there's the lower part right here. And there's St. George's, there's us. And this is from the peak of the roof over the narthex. I think it's like 67 feet to the front, or no, 72 or 3 to the front of the nave. Yes.
I forgot what I was going to follow up and ask, but I got a text message saying, is the goal to stay on the property? Or is that part of phase one?
Part of, let's figure it out. What this tells us is, whoops, yeah, what this tells us is, yeah, it's feasible, space-wise. Whether, right, and then some of the things Michael was talking about. How far out do we want to look? Do we want to plan?
But that's all in that phase one.
That's all in the visioning and assessment, yes.
So I'm trying to drill down to what do you need today?
So what I need, yeah, good.
What is that, the planning team you want? Assume more than 2 people.
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to, actually, I'll put them out now, but I'm going to put out some sign-up sheets, and if folks would just sort of put their name down and what it is they like to do and whatever special skills they have. I think we're going to pick probably half a dozen to flesh this out, to flesh out the plan, right? Half a dozen folks to flesh out the plan. We need somebody. Yes, that's the initial planning team. And then from there, bingo. From there, we'll know, okay, we need these working groups. And from the list of all the volunteers and the skill sets, we'll go, hey, it looks like we'll probably be able to put this person here and this person there. Everybody will get a chance to say yes or no, of course. And frankly, I don't see being, tapped or stepping forward to be on one of the working groups at the beginning, meaning that you're there for the duration. Maybe it's just a phase, and maybe you come back later at a later phase because your interest or experience match a later phase, or you just need to take a break from this, because that's going to happen too.
And therefore, Chris, you might want to clarify, this is the framework that has been used, it's been proven in your past experience, correct?
Well, this sort of planning, yes.
This isn't something you just invented over breakfast.
Right. So what you're looking at is like operational planning for Iraq or Afghanistan. Yeah, that works.
So you're comparing this plan to
Yeah. It's going to be about that hard. Hopefully not that expensive and preferably more successful. Yes. Now, I did have an experience working with Prince of Peace when in 2012, 13, they were looking to expand their school. Prince of Peace is 26, 27 acres, a number of buildings, several of them, or two of them needed to be torn down. Several of them needed extensive maintenance work, had been deferred for years, and they were looking to expand their school. They needed more classroom space, and so I worked on that project. I didn't join right at the beginning, but it was probably in 2 or 3 months into their planning is when I joined there as the director of finance administration. Sir.
Have you seen any of that work that was done with Mary Martin and Kim and myself when we brought in the consultant?
I haven't seen the work, but I think I've seen the plans.
Yeah, where he was looking at the parking lot and all that kind of stuff. And it was very interesting that the parking lot had to accommodate being able to turn a fire truck around in. I thought it was very interesting that was work was done.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm glad you mentioned that, because we stumbled into a whole bunch of those sorts of things at Prince of Peace, because we were really trying to shoehorn a new building in, and you run into a lot of those sorts of little things that will eat up a lot of your time and drive you crazy. But that's the kind of thing that as we do, in this first phase, the assessment and visioning, site selection and analysis, that's the kind of detail we need to get into so that we're not stumbling across that after we decided we want to do something. Now we have to change it. Do we have any questions for TV Land? Yes.
Does the school have to be a separate building or facility? Could there not be some dual purpose with our own educating space and then that being used by the school?
Yes, that's a potential solution. And as a matter of fact, that's how Prince of Peace got started. I'm thinking back, this of course was well before me, but I think they started giving classes in what were the parish offices, and then they turned over the whole building of all the parish offices. They built when they built the new church, they moved the parish offices into the old church, and they turned over the old building that had housed the parish offices, and that became the school. Yes?
Are you planning on building into the assessment and visioning phase, since we spoke a lot about a school, so we're talking about a church. Well, are you thinking after all this comments that maybe the school should be part of that, or is that feasible, or?
You know what I'm thinking is that when we do the visioning, that it sounds like there's going to be a discussion of a school.
Yeah.
And that'll be in there too. And then and then we'll have to decide, okay, what does that mean? And what has priority? And what does it mean in terms of how much money we'll need to raise, how much time it will take? Your perspective this way.
It probably would require a lot of additional money, because you're going to have to
group so we can see what percentage of, like people that have already put their kids through school have a different vision maybe. Some of us are jokingly talking about a nursing home.
That was in the visioning for Prince of Peace. Well, actually, absolutely, because they had land. They were land rich. And so one of the things we were looking at was, well, should we put, we were, the vision was we would build a village around the church, kind of old school. But the idea was you had a school, you had some housing for families, and they had enough land to do it. They decided not to ultimately, and then there was going to be a facility for older folks.
I think before we went too far, when you're asking people to give money, it kind of gives you an idea what one group is going to see and another group.
That's right.
Not have to be divided by age, divided, but the vision might be.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good point, and yes, that has to be part of the assessment is, okay, not only, what do we have and what do we want, but who are we, right? That kind of fits in there too.
Well, see, the school is a community asset, not just a St. George asset.
Right, right. But if you do that, what do you do to this? Right? So then everything gets scaled up. Because I'll tell you what, I think if we were to decide to build a school and we would attract way more families, we'd end up with a number way bigger than 212, and we need a number way bigger than 212, right? But if you just start thinking about the giving base, yes.
Went to a church down in Newport, Bluffton, and they had a nice old church building, and they decided they were going to lose it to the Episcopal Church, so they wanted to buy other property, which they did, and they started a school on it. Well, lo and behold, they got their property, they kept it. But what happened is, the church started growing, and they said, where are all these people coming from? Their kids were getting educated to such a good degree that the parents said, what is this church? And they're now getting a lot of people into that church, so that can happen. I don't see us starting that way, because we're not being threatened by the Episcopal Church like they were. They got creative and just said, we're not going to let the Episcopal Church tell us what to do. We're going to pretend like we've lost it. We're going to go over here, and then we blessed them, let them keep their building, and now they're growing. And they said to us, they never forecasted that.
Yeah, I think
Things can happen that are surprising.
I think that goes back to what Father Paul said when we opened, is, let God go before us, and He will show us the path. And we can't see it right now. All we can do is the best we can in the assessment phase and start moving, and stuff will happen. Yes, Michael?
We're sort of a conundrum of sorts. It takes people to finance what we're doing. We don't have the room, but enough people to finance what we want to do. Father Paul mentioned one time, it was suggested about adding a third service. When your membership portion that, we might have to do that.
Well,
So, Father Paul?
I was going to say, before COVID happened, we were in much the same attendance situation we are now. We had a little bit fewer people. If you remember, we were starting to ask people in the late service to start going to the early service on rotation. We still have plenty of room at the early service. Before we went to a third service, I want to see 2 full services. Now we need a third service.
That's a way to increase membership, without having to increase the revenue without having to grow prematurely.
Some of our regular folks would have to sacrifice the 11 o'clock service and just go to the early. At least some effort. That's an easy way to alleviate pressure still have that crossover period of Sunday school, where the parking is the issue. Maybe we can solve that some way too, but before I have a third service, which is a major undertaking, I'd want to see 2 full rooms, and we're not even near that. Yeah.
So I've already figured out how we're going to do it. Some of you will remember, I remember, if your license plate ends in an even number.
This solution would not work at our church at present, but it could be part of the future. One of our larger churches up in Charlottesville has all of their Christian education on Wednesday nights, and they include a supper. So like the class that everyone enjoys, or the classes that people enjoy happen on Wednesdays rather than Sundays. And they don't have any Sunday school on Sundays. They just have services.
Yes.
And there's plenty of time, but
Would that be to facilitate the 2 services
that would be to make Sundays work.
with 2, or you say?
With 3.
No, I'm saying with 2 services because really, well, I haven't thought about it that way. And I'm not saying that's something we could do soon, but I'm saying churches have solved this in unique ways, and actually, like people are starting to enjoy the potluck dinner. That Wednesday night with a meal and a class, they love it up there. Now, that's not to say that fits right away with us, but it's a possible solution because parking during Sunday school, if we keep doing this,
Well, I mean, I can tell you with all the kids I have and all the activities, we don't have anything on Wednesday because everybody
everybody goes to church.
goes
on
to
Wednesday.
Sunday school, or
Yeah.
the youth group or whatever.
Right, yeah. So
I mean, that wasn't where it was in Ohio, but here.
we have a few possibilities of alleviating the situation without, anyway, we have to get creative over the next few years if this happens. And it looks like this may even become more rapid, the things going on in the headlines, people looking for an Orthodox civil liturgical sacramental church. And, those numbers may rise quicker. We may have to think on our feet. And that's in my imagination, too. I know that doesn't help for people who don't drive at night and all that. I'm saying I can't solve everything right now. I'm just giving you, there are some other possibilities.
So we can't kill our trees either.
You cannot kill your trees.
And,
I know, but I gotta.
oops,
Oh, I see it.
I went the wrong way.
We won't figure that out right now. Just acquire it.
All this stuff we're talking about just made phase 1 longer, right? And that's why, as we get into it, we're gonna adjust this.
Keep in mind too, that the bigger you make the church, seating capacity wise, the county is gonna require you to make a bigger parking lot.
That's right. We have to, absolutely have to.
Right now, the regulation is 1 parking space for every 10 cars.
That's feasibility.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's one of these puzzles that you change one thing, a bunch of other things have to change too. So, and that's why we're going to be sort of deliberate about it, and think through each one of these steps. And at some point, in here, we're going to have to get a professional, an architectural firm who can take our ideas and create the kind of drawings that can then go to plans and actually be constructed.
But this really starts next week, phase 1.
Yeah, let's get past New Year's. But you're right, Bob, because that line right there is 12 days away. That's 2024. We could conceivably be at our limit in 2025 if we keep growing the way we're growing. Yes.
What about growth population just for the county of Greenville?
That-
That's growing exponentially, so.
I didn't go into that, but that's in here. Yes. The economy, the growth of Greenville, the number of families that are moving here, the churn, if you will, in other churches, and folks will be looking for one whose anchor has set and is not dragging. Did that go out? Did that go out into the world? All of those things will potentially affect what we're doing.
It might be even greater than we are thinking of it right now. Just drive down Ocean Road.
That's exactly right. But that's the scary part of this. Yes.
For those of us that have been here for more than 5 years, have seen that road. It's just been unbelievable. So there isn't any reason that that won't continue. And that's what we have to be in the planning stages for, I feel, is what's coming at us and how are we going to be prepared for it.
You're absolutely right. Any others? I'll stay as long as you want.
Point of clarification, do those numbers include the under 18?
It's everybody, yes, yes. So, and I think we bumped up for Mary right there. 2 days ago. Yes.
Somebody said there was another APA that wanted to build in the area. Is that?
Not an APA there, but Anglican churches are starting to pop
Oh,
up.
so it's not like a competition. What I'm thinking
Yeah.
of is if we're doing something a certain size, and I'm thinking of going to the identical.
No, we do not have an identical church like ours. Actually, amazingly, in Greenville, one of the churches that's similar to us is considering closing. One of the churches that's similar to us in Spartanburg is considering closing, which is unbelievable to me with the amount of growth. It has to do with the culture of the parish, has to do with and so we actually don't have a church like ours in town other than Holy Trinity, which is, they're right in the center of downtown practically. There are ACNA style churches, which are more typically evangelical style churches, praise bands and all that. And those churches are popping up left and right. But if you're looking for a church like ours, they're precious few.
So that means the demand might get higher.
The demand might get higher.
And then you said these people might be coming from these other churches that are looking for more of an anchor, and that also means money, and what do they want?
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, we're going to have to. We'll be taking on new information continuously as we go through this process, and we'll be adjusting the plan accordingly as we go through the process. But it starts off. We need to do a detailed assessment of the local economy. Who is here? Who might we attract? All of that should be numbers that we kind of are at least familiar with, and that'll be part of that first phase. Is I need somebody who's into demographics. And ultimately, when we get to so I'm looking for for volunteers to put that down as an interest, and ultimately we'll need somebody who's studied sort of the art that we'll want to put in here, and who studied sort of the architecture of Old English parish churches, and have gleaned some ideas for what we might want ours to look like. There's room for all the talent in this room, sir.
That's kind of a good idea. Do you have, like, you mentioned that you've been through sort of the planning, do you have some characteristics or
From then,
the traits and characteristics that are helpful to having people on these boards?
yes. I will have to think about it because, again, I didn't join right at the beginning. They had already started, and they actually started with an architect. So they had an architectural firm that did their, a series of design charrettes that, surveys went out to them, to all the members, and that information was gathered and collated, and then they had a couple of, and I think I joined them as a second or third, where they were, had everybody actually in the church and great big whiteboards, and they're, everybody putting yellow stickies up of the things that they wanted. Yeah, I have all of that stuff.
Did they look back and say that it was a good idea, or they would have done it differently having that architect?
Well, I was running it, so I thought it was brilliant. No. We did, and to be honest, that's right. To be honest, we made some mistakes, but you correct those and you keep moving on.
So Chris, does the bishop have to be involved in this? Do we have to share with him whether it's phase 1 or phase 2 or just one?
I think, unlike the Catholic Church, the bishop's role is less, because all the Catholic churches belong to the bishop. And so if a Catholic church wants to build or expand, he's directly involved. And of course, with that comes money too, and expertise and all that stuff. The APA doesn't run that way. We would be crazy, and Father Paul might be in trouble if we didn't involve the diocese. And I've already made contact with a person who kind of heads up the building or sort of monitors what all the churches are doing with respect to their buildings and their capital campaigns. You know where to find me if you have more questions. Yes, right. I can't hide because I'm here every Sunday, and Evan will probably rat me out if I try to anyway.
Chris, have you given any consideration to putting out as to some sort of capital campaign that people pledge over 3
Yes,
years?
yes. I mean, that's how we did it at Prince of Peace. They had an ongoing capital campaign. They're almost always in a capital campaign. But that's exactly right. They had an ongoing capital campaign. They had pledges. They had a schedule that they expected to be receiving the funds. That's exactly right. You have to have that in order to get the bank to loan you money. And we had to be able to show that to the diocese in order for them to loan. That's where most of the money came from, actually.
Do we have to have our present mortgage down to any particular level before we can?
Yes, it's about paid off now.
It will be paid in about October of this upcoming year, 2024. Yeah, so it happens right as we need it to be paid off.
Yeah. So at that point, if people are doing tithing to the building or to the mortgage now, continue tithing that to a building fund or whatever it's called by then. When it's paid off.
Yes, I think that's how it's gonna come out when we make those decisions. We'll start the capital campaign. The folks who are tithing to the mortgage will be asked if they would consider continuing to and putting it into a building fund.
Any other questions?
Not really a question, but a statement. When you have a larger facility, your workforce, or whatever you want to call it, is going to be larger. You're going to have to work with a larger facility, and that comes with added costs as well. So you
That's right.
say, we're looking at the building. Yes, we're looking at the building, but we're also looking at the things that have to be accomplished in that building.
Cost of ownership goes up, right? And that's got to be factored in. That's part of it. Okay? I'm always available. Answer any questions you have. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention.